This is the BMW M1, a unique car produced by the German company from 1978 to 1981. This car was not designed with rallying in mind, but when many of the stages in the championship were on tarmac in France, BMW decided to enter the M1 to achieve more brand recognition and publicity. The straight-six engine was tuned to produce 430 brake horsepower, and the power was transferred to the rear wheels with shorter gearing. The M1 proved to be wildly difficult to drive, with many successful drivers struggling to control it. On top of this, the M1 was very unreliable. In fact, it didn't even finish a single event in 1983. However, in 1984, the car, mostly unchanged, did achieve a second-place finish, but that was pretty much the last of the BMW M1 in rallying. I was lucky enough to travel to Monaco a few years ago, and I went to a museum containing the Prince of Monaco's car collection. I saw Formula 1 cars ranging from the 70s to the 2000s, a vast array of legendary rally cars, and finally the BMW M1. I had never seen an M1 in real life and was already in shock after seeing so many of the coolest cars I'll probably ever see, but I was definitely impressed by the M1. So today I figured I might as well drive the M1 in the new WRC game, and to pay tribute to that car museum, I'm going to do a stage in Monaco. But since the M1 is so hard to drive, it might be a little bit difficult.
30.
Now obviously the M1 raced on tarmac and all of the Monaco stages are paved, so we're good to go on that front. This stage is 8.6 kilometers, and since it's a shorter one, we'll do it forwards, and then we'll do it backwards as well. Alright, here we are at the start line in Monte Carlo in our BMW M1. 5 red lights are coming on, our handbrake is engaged, and we are setting off now. 8.6 kilometers to go, and hopefully this is the one. I did have a couple of nasty crashes, as you can see earlier in the video, but hopefully this is the one. I'm not going to include those because it would just take way too long to edit all that footage. So anyway, we are off, and the first, I'd say probably the first quarter of the downhill stage is very twisty. It's a little hairpin heavy, and a lot of the corners are 3s and 2s and 1s. And yeah, it's a little bit more heavy braking focused, hairpins, and unfortunately, this car is a little difficult to navigate around those more twistier sections of the track. It's very wide and it feels very heavy, so it's a little bit cumbersome, especially around the hairpins. It feels a little too heavy. The weight transfer feels very off in this car. It feels like as soon as you kind of get into a wider corner, the weight kind of shifts in a way that's not really ideal, and it can kind of throw you off and kind of send you into some snap oversteer. But into the second hairpin right now, hopefully this one goes smoothly. Unfortunately, the handbrake in this car is not really very effective. I know I can play around with the settings, and I've tried a couple different handbrake settings with this car, but nothing really seems to work. As soon as you use the handbrake, it kind of just sends you into a spin. But through the last hairpin right now, and we are finally on our way down the hill and into the town. So hopefully we can keep this thing on the track. I will say it actually is a little bit difficult to drive. The power is in the rear wheels, so on a straight like this, it's a little bit easier. You have more of that aerodynamic grip. Once you get into the slower corners, that's really where you experience some of that just a little bit too much raw power to the rear wheels, and just lacking that aerodynamic grip. So it's a little difficult, especially in the slower corners. Right now on the straights, it's definitely a little bit more planted, so hopefully there's a lot more straights coming up. Very sharp right-hand turn coming up, and gonna have to really brake heavy for this one. The brakes don't feel great, if I'm gonna be honest. You have to brake a little bit earlier than you actually think you have to. Obviously I'm used to driving, Formula 1 cars and F1 games and such, but yeah, the brakes are definitely not as effective as you think. So this section right here is actually quite tricky. It's really fast, and the road is so uneven that it can really kind of send you bumping out to the left or right, and pretty much just end your run right there. So pretty much at halfway through the stage right now, and we've made it through, I would say probably the difficult end of the stage. I think that first half on the downhill section is a little tricky, and then once we do it uphill, it's going to be the second half that's a little more tricky. So we'll have to see how the rest of it goes. The rest of the stage is definitely a little bit easier. The road is a little wider, and there's less heavy braking zones, which is good for the M1 specifically. The handling is very difficult, as I said, in the slower corners. So hopefully we'll be able to keep more planted on the track. Going a little bit wide right there. As soon as you dip a wheel off the tarmac and onto the gravel or the grass, it's pretty much game over. The grip is just absolutely nothing, and your car drags to the right. Very close call right there. So that's definitely something that you have to keep an eye out for, and just be very diligent. You're staying as centered as you possibly can and remaining on the tarmac. So it's definitely very different to driving on gravel or driving on snow or ice or anything, just because the tarmac is pretty much your only source of grip. So as soon as you dip off that, it can be definitely very scary. About three-quarters of the way through the stage right now, and we're on pretty much the last stretch right here. This is a very high-speed section, a lot of quick left and rights. They are very slight turns, so it's you know, there is more grip, but it's still very sketchy, especially cutting the corners to the inside. That hill can really throw you for a loop. So luckily getting through that high-speed section without any incidents. But into the final stretch of the stage right now, this section is actually a little bit harder than it looks. There's a couple of speed bumps, you can see one right there, and they really lose all of your grip. As soon as you go over that, you're pretty much a sitting duck, and you got to make sure you're at least straight when entering that speed bump. Trying the handbrake right there, a little bit wide of an angle. Not really the most effective way through the corner. Definitely lost a little bit of time right there as compared to just braking. But across the line, and that was probably could have gone a little bit smoother. It was a little sketchy on some parts, a lot of close calls, but hopefully we do better on the way up the hill. Alright, at the start line now, and this time heading up the hill. So exact stage, but just in reverse. 5 red lights are coming on, our handbrake is engaged, and hopefully this one can be a little bit smoother. Off we go. And we just kind of have to mainly focus on the second half of the stage. Obviously, these first couple corners are slower, and that's where this car likes to struggle. But the second half is where we have those hairpins, it's where we have those harder braking zones, and that's what we're going to have to focus on. As long as we can get through there, that was a little close right there, a little bit of oversteer. But as long as we can get through this section and make it to the second half, we're going to have to be very cautious in the second half, just to make sure we get through in one piece. But hitting the speed bump right there and already heading into the fast, kind of quick left and rights of this mountainside section. So hopefully, again, no mistakes right there. Like I said before, the mountain on the left-hand side is a little bit daunting. If you make any contact with that hill on the left, it can kind of just kick you out right and kind of just send you off the hill. So gotta make sure we avoid that, which we do pretty successfully. Dropping down to second gear now, swinging around that left-hand turn and onto the straight. So we'll gain a lot more grip on this straight now, as well as a lot more speed, obviously, into fifth gear now. And we have a 3 left coming up, so definitely have to brake hard for that. The brakes, again, are very difficult. It's really hard to know exactly where to brake. Obviously, you know, I'm used to driving without a racing line on a lot of games. It's not an issue with that, or, you know, finding the correct braking point. It's just that once you brake, the car doesn't slow down as fast as you think. So that's definitely what I'm struggling with too, is I think sometimes I'm actually braking too early, try to compensate for that lack of brake power, and unfortunately just losing a little bit of time. Obviously, we're not really paying attention to the times here just to get through the stage smoothly, but it is definitely annoying when I'm a little bit too slow entering one of the corners. But almost halfway through the stage now, and we definitely don't want to mess up right now. I really do want to go as fast as I possibly can and just drive as smoothly as I can. I'm not really focused on the times, but it's very satisfying to just drive around one of these stages as smooth and as quick as you can. It's really, really satisfying. So absolutely flying down this downhill section right now, and honestly, that was a very close call. I was really on the edge of grip. I could feel the car want to kick out and just, you know, completely send off the track. But very close call right there, dipping the 2 right tires into the gravel, and luckily we keep our grip and are able to get through this section nice and smooth. So 1 right coming up, or sorry, a 2 right coming up, and definitely braking very early for that one. Unfortunately, the handbrake would look so much nicer around these corners, but it's just not really that doable. The handbrake just is not effective for this car on tarmac. It really, it's a struggle. But on the straight now, and we have a little bit of a hill coming up, and then as soon as we take this left, we're going to be heading up the hill and into that kind of more twisty, heavy braking hairpin section. So that's where we need to be careful. So we're 3/4 of the way through the stage now. The last quarter is the final stretch, and this is where we're going to have to be very cautious and make sure we don't make any major mistakes. So definitely what I'm looking out for is the weight transfer into the heavier braking. The weight transfer, as I said in the very beginning of the video, it's really difficult to manage and to understand how the car is going to handle after the weight transfer into the corner. So that's definitely something that I'm keeping an eye out for, as well as braking. The braking, especially into the hard braking zones like the hairpins, is it's a little unpredictable. Like I've said, throughout the majority of the video, the brakes aren't as good as you think they are. So through the second hairpin now, and we have 1 more final hairpin to go, but in between that is a bunch of hard lefts and hard rights in a very narrow part of the track. Again, this car is so wide. It's so wide. It's really difficult to judge the space you have on either side of the car. So so far making it through without an issue, dipping some wheels onto the grass right there, luckily staying on the track and keeping that grip. And I think this looks like it's going to be a pretty good run through here. All we have to worry about is there's a couple hard rights and lefts coming up, 3 rights and 3 lefts, and then we have that hairpin and then we're pretty much home free. So cutting some of these corners, trying to get it through here as fast and as smooth as I possibly can, and luckily staying with the proper amount of grip on the tarmac. But here's the last section of hard rights, hard lefts, our final hairpin of the stage, and I'm going to take this one nice and slow. Unfortunately, not using the handbrake at all yet again, and approaching the finish line now. Here we are, and across the line in our BMW M1 in Monte Carlo. I feel like that run was honestly a little bit smoother than the downhill section. You guys can let me know in the comments what you think, but it felt a little more satisfying to go through the uphill section on that second time around. So overall, the M1, I will say, was actually quite difficult to drive. The first problem is that it's so wide. It's really, really wide, and obviously a lot of this track is very narrow, especially in that kind of more mountainous section, the first half of the downhill and the second half of the uphill. Near the hairpins, it's a very narrow track, so the wideness of the M1 is a little bit difficult to navigate. Also, random snap oversteer was kind of an issue, especially in the slower speed corners. It would just kind of snap out wide, and I don't really understand why. In the lighter braking zones, or sorry, the heavier braking zones, it did feel very heavy in the corners, and the weight transfer corner to corner was definitely off a little bit. I don't think it was a physics problem with the game. I think it's just the nature of the car. And lastly, the handbrakes were difficult, or sorry, the hairpins were difficult just because the handbrake was pretty much unusable. As soon as you pulled the handbrake, you'd completely spin out. So unfortunately, yeah, not the easiest car to drive. There also was a lot of just straight up power to the rear wheels, which made exiting corners a little bit tricky, and especially into braking zones, the brake bias and the way the power was to the wheels, it felt a little bit cumbersome. But other than that, it was a fun car to drive, but definitely very difficult. So if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see more WRC, please leave a comment below. I think it's a lot of fun. I always enjoy recording it. So yeah, if you want to see more, please let me know in the comments or in my Discord, which is linked in the description. So again, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.